PNG is celebrating its 50th anniversary of independence from Australia. And now they're facing an agreement which is basically going to handcuff them to Australia in the event of a conflict.
Ben Packham is the Australia's Foreign Affairs and Defence correspondent, and he's joining me from Port Moresby. Ben, this seems like a big deal. Is it?
Well, it's a big deal how things have kind of gone awry. This agreement, the Albanese government's been promoting this agreement as a very big deal for Australia and for Papua New Guinea. They've talked it up. Richard Marles says it's profound and so forth. But what we saw today was something well short of them signing the agreement. They've signed a communique to continue to progress the agreement, but not the treaty itself, which Australia had been saying would be signed today.
Anthony Albanese said again and again in his press conference that this was something that PNG asked for.
Importantly, as Prime Minister Marape has said, this was initiated by Papua New Guinea. It was a request to Australia, and it was a request which we readily agreed to.
We often see this in the Pacific, with aid agreements and so forth. We don't want to look like the big, colonial power coming in and throwing our weight around. Look, it's quite possible that it arose out of a conversation between the two, it's very clear that this is an agreement that Australia really wants. It wants to have a capital A alliance with Papua New Guinea, and it's also clear that there are mixed feelings in PNG about the extent of this agreement.
The elephant in the room, though, of course, Ben, is China. The Prime Minister of PNG said that his Defence Minister was now going to go on a roadshow and talk to all PNG's valued partners about this deal. First stop will be Beijing. Is that where this deal's going to potentially get scuttled?
You can imagine what the Chinese are going to say when PNG Defence Minister Billy Joseph flies into Beijing. I'm sure they will remind him of China's formidable military power, show him some footage of the recent Victory Day parade perhaps, and, perhaps suggest that Papua New Guinea would not like to be on the wrong side of that military power. This proposed treaty is based on the ANZUS alliance. Now, it would elevate the relationship with PNG to an absolute alliance on a par with that which we have with the US and New Zealand. Now, that's great for us because PNG, its geography, effectively would give us, the ability to defend our northern approaches much more effectively. Now, in the event of a war, this would probably happen anyway. We wouldn't be stopping to ask permission, probably, if someone was coming our way. But, it's this concept of forward defence. The treaty term would obligate PNG to effectively fight on Australia's side if there was a war. Now, what's the most likely, major conflict in the region? It's a conflict with China over Taiwan. Now, Australia would be very reluctant to get into such a war, of course, but we have an alliance with the United States. And so, it's potentially a domino effect that could come and, affect Papua New Guinea. Now, I do think that, this is sort of dawning on people here now that, that they could find themselves in a conflict with the world's, number 2 military power and potentially the number 1 military power in this region.
Ben, I'm sure you're much too sensible to bet money on these kinds of things, but if you were a betting man, do you think this deal with PNG is actually going to come off?
It's really, nothing is certain here. I'd say it's a toss of a coin. That's about as far as I would go. Albanese and Marape, they're both saying all the right things. They both say they're committed to it, but perhaps we have, moved a bit quickly here. I think, the Australian government should really have waited for Marape to get his ducks in a row before we came over, saying, hey, we're going to be signing this thing on Wednesday.
Do you think strategically the Albanese administration has thought, well, we're here, we have him, we can get in front of some cameras today, potentially lock this down?
Yes, absolutely. They wanted to combine it with a big occasion in PNG. Something I think Australia did not consider, and maybe even Marape didn't consider, is PNG is celebrating its 50th anniversary of independence from Australia. And now they're facing an agreement which is basically going to handcuff them to Australia in the event of a conflict. And so, somewhat ironic, I think, and, maybe that is something that's feeding into the considerations in the Cabinet and later in the Parliament.